Hi guys, it's Aoife from Words of Clover and I am here with a reading tag today. So I am doing the reading taste tag, which was created by Harriet over at Harriet Rosie a couple of months ago, and I've seen lots of people do this tag and have a really nice chat about the different questions with this tag, so that is what I'm going to do today. So the first question is to describe your reading taste in one sentence. So I have gone with an eclectic mix with an emphasis on the female voice, but particularly the Irish female voice. So I think anyone who has been on this channel, who has watched any of my videos, knows that I like to read a lot of genres. I normally don't read a lot of genres altogether. I kind of like to mix and match my books with every book that I read, so I don't get bored of stories, or I don't feel overdone with certain genres. So that's why I kind of like to keep my reading fresh, and I think that's what also helps me kind of avoid reading slumps. I don't really suffer from reading slumps at all, and yeah, I definitely feel like the fact that I am always reading something new, a different genre with every book I'm reading, it definitely helps with just kind of keeping my reading brain kind of active and ready for new stories all the time. Obviously, I really love reading books that are written by women and are about women, and I also really love reading Irish fiction, and obviously sharing Irish fiction with all of you guys and letting you know what kind of Irish books you guys should be reading, especially coming up to the Irish Readathon every year, which happens every March, and I love sharing about Irish books for the entire month, but then also throughout the rest of the year as well. So the next question is to describe your reading taste with category, so genre, age, length, that kind of thing. So as I've said before, I tend to read a lot of genres. The only genres I feel like I don't really gear towards would be, I guess, very dark horror type of books, or very, like, extremely violent horror, maybe slasher books. I don't read a whole lot of them. And then I wouldn't read a huge amount of dark romance or new adult romance books. I do read them occasionally now and again, especially if there's ones I see people talking about on TikTok, or particularly like booktubers like Peace Love Books, Jess about Peace Love Books. When I watch her videos, I always end up getting some really good romance recommendations, so that's where I normally get my romance recommendations from. So those are the genres that I wouldn't pick up as frequently as other genres, but I really love reading a little bit of fantasy. I love reading literary fiction and historical fiction. I've read a lot of historical fiction the last couple of years, and I read a lot of historical fiction growing up as a teenager as well. It was one of my most loved genres. I think with historical fiction you can just you can go anywhere or to any time, and I just really love that. I love experiencing different time eras with our characters, and with the research that authors have done. I think it's such a great way of learning about history and learning about different people or times or political figures in history. I really love doing that through historical fiction. And then I read a mix of YA and adult. I think I have definitely been gearing more towards adults the last few years. I definitely feel like I'm at that point now. I'm 31, I'm almost 32 years old, and there are certain elements of YA that just don't really work with me anymore. This section is to show a few books to explain your reading taste. So I have a pile here because I can never just show one or two books. I always have to show loads. So I have a few here that kind of explain, I guess, when I'm looking at non-fiction. So I have Irish kind of female focused. Again, I particularly like when I'm reading non-fiction, it's either to do with animals or nature, or it's to do with Ireland in some way, and particularly or women in history and women's voices, and women's experiences in history. So these are good examples of this. So one is Republic of Shame by Keelan Hogan, which is a look at the mother and baby homes in Ireland. And then another book that I really love is a dog focused book, which is What the Dog Knows by Kat Warren, and this is about her experience training a dog to be a cadaver dog, and it's just a really fascinating look into how dogs use their noses, and how humans have learned how to train dogs to get their dogs to use their noses in a myriad of amazing different ways, from cancer detecting to finding bodies, even if those bodies are in water, which is just really interesting. And I definitely recommend anyone interested in nature nonfiction to pick this book up. I really love just kind of nature, animal focused fiction books as well. So one that I really loved was A Dog's Purpose by W. Bruce Cameron. And then another book I've loved ever since I was a teenager, and I reread this fairly regularly, is Blind Beauty by K.M. Payton, which is a very typical kind of girl going down the wrong tracks, ends up finding an affinity with horses, and in one horse in particular called Buffoon, and she trains to be a jockey so she's able to ride Buffoon in the races. Some fantasy books I have here as examples of what I like. One of them is Malice, the Fateful and Fallen series. This is the first book by John Gwynne. Another series I would love to reread, which is also one of my favourites, is The Magician's Guild by Trudy Canavan. This is just the very typical type of fantasy that I love. And then when it comes to kind of just literary or Irish voices, I have Trespasses by Louise Kennedy, which is an amazing book where we're following a girl who is living in Belfast in the 1970s, so during the Troubles, and she ends up in a relationship that is not good for a myriad of reasons, and we are following this kind of almost like a tragic love story. We always know it's kind of doomed for failure, and we are following that with the backdrop of the Troubles. And then one of my favourite books of this year has been The Rachel Incident by Caroline O'Donoghue, which is about a young Irish girl finishing her university degree in Cork. And she ends up meeting her best friend during this year, and the two of them end up in this kind of weird relationship with a professor that she has, and we kind of see the results of that relationship ends up kind of really really directing the rest of her life. Number 4 is a book that I did enjoy that you thought would be to your reading taste. So I have a few to talk about. One of them is Seven Steeples, which I did read earlier this year. And I've talked a lot about this book like this year, so I don't want to go on too much about it. But I've actually since unhauled this book, which is a pity because I did really, really love the copy of that book because it was so cute. It was such a really nice edition of the book. But this is following a couple who end up basically kind of moving away, kind of becoming hermits in a way, moving to the countryside. They don't want anything to do with kind of the real world anymore. And I thought this was going to be like really up my alley in terms of someone kind of turning their back on the modern world in a way and just living in the country, living a more like simplistic, like idealistic life. And instead it was just kind of, I don't know, I just felt they were kind of pathetic. They didn't have any, they were just kind of like getting money from the government, even though they were both well able to work. And I just really didn't like that. It just left a bad taste in my mouth. And then there was a lot of things around, and then there was just some descriptions in the book as well that were good in terms of writing, but like just kind of grossed me out as well. So I just wasn't a big fan of that one. Another one that I thought I would enjoy was Haven by Emma Donoghue, which I read last year, and this follows a couple of monks as they travel to an island off the coast of Ireland to kind of like start up a new church. And this one was just like very boring. There was just like too much religion in it for me, I think. And then there was just a lot of kind of gruesome animal killing and stuff like that because they were killing the birds on the island, but there was just certain descriptions again that kind of just really turned my stomach a little bit that I didn't really like. So yeah, that was a real disappointment because I generally love Emma Donoghue books, so that one just was sad for me that I didn't like it because I really thought I would love it because I generally love everything that she writes. And then another book in terms of kind of animal fiction that I've talked about before that I didn't like was The Art of Racing in the Rain, which is a book where we're following this man. We're basically in the mind of a dog as he gets his owner, and his owner ends up meeting a girl, getting married, they have a child, and all these things happen. And from the start, I'd heard so many good things about this book. I really thought it was going to be one that I really, really enjoyed, but then I just really didn't like the voice of the dog. I just thought the way the author wrote the dog, it was too kind of, I don't know, mature. It was too human-like, and I was like, I just don't think dogs think like that. Yeah, I just didn't really like the way he portrayed the dog, so I definitely didn't like that one. Number 5 is a book that you enjoyed that you didn't think that you might like, or that I maybe wouldn't enjoy as much as I did. One I've talked again a lot about this year, that's Blood, Sweat and Chrome, which is a non-fiction book all about Mad Max Fury Road, which I heard about from Audrey at Perpetual Pages, and when they talked about it, I was just like, this sounds so interesting. And even though I don't have a lot of like interest in terms of like filmmaking and stuff, there was just something about the way Audrey talked about the book and what was involved in it, and like the cast and crew interviews in it. I was like, okay, this sounds really good, and I was like hooked onto that book. I loved like every single minute. I loved learning all these different details about the filming of Mad Max Fury Road, and now I think like every time I watch it I'm going to have like a better and better appreciation of what went into make that movie, and what a miracle it was that like no one died during the making of that movie in terms of like everything that they did for it. So yeah, I really, really enjoyed that one. It was such a surprising like favorite book for me. And another one that I really loved last year, that it's not that I wasn't expecting to love it, it's just in terms of what I've heard other people complain about in terms of this author's writing, I was kind of expecting to meet certain things within the writing that I didn't like or that threw me off, and that was Pet Sematary by Stephen King. So I don't know, you hear certain things about Stephen King's writing, a lot of it is quite dated in terms of language or views about certain things in terms of like racism and homophobia and stuff like that. So I've always heard people say this about Stephen King, and this was my first Stephen King novel, so I was just kind of going in a little bit trepidatious maybe. I wasn't really, you know, I said I don't think I'm going to love this, like this could be a big flop for me, I could hate this. And then I ended up really, really enjoying it, and I've kind of decided that maybe every Halloween, every October, I'm going to try and read a Stephen King book every year, because I think that would just be like a fun little project to do every single year. It's like very low pressure, just like one book a year. So yeah, that's kind of, that kickstarted that for me. So this year I'm going to try and read Joyland, which I have from a library. So hopefully I might like that one as much, but at least I have a nice, like, kind of one to have at the top of the tier list in terms of like ones to try and beat maybe. So we will see if I like any as much as I did like Pet Cemetery. So yeah, I really enjoyed that one. Question 6 is show us some books on your TBR that you feel like are exactly to your taste, and I have 4 here to talk about. One of them is Service by Sarah Gilmartin. I talked about this in like my most anticipated Irish releases for the year earlier this year. In this one we are following a character who, I think she worked in a kitchen with this chef who is now being accused years later of either sexual misconduct or sexual assault in some way, and I think it's kind of a look at the kind of the Me Too movement within the culinary world, and it is set in Ireland, and yeah, I've heard really good things about it. I actually just saw Lauren from Lauren in the Books has been reading it and has really enjoyed it, so I'm looking forward to reading this. I was going to pick this up in November, but now I'm thinking I might save it for March. I don't know, I might save it for the Irish Readathon. I might not. Let me know what you think, or maybe read it in January or February so I can recommend it then during videos for the Irish Readathon. I don't know. When I got this book, I got in Dunu Books in London, and I just look at this cover, it's just stunning. This is The Queens of Sarmiento Park by Camila Sosa Vieda, and this one is about, it's kind of looking at a group of I think it's like either like a bunch of drag queens or like kind of a queer group of people, and they end up finding this baby in this park that they're in, and I think it's just a story of what happens when they find this baby, what they do afterwards, and I presume we're just looking at certain different characters and what their lives are like. But I've heard good things about this one. Again, this cover is just stunning, and it's a shame it's actually been on my TBR for like a year now and I haven't read it yet, so I might need to prioritise this one soon. Question 7 is a booktuber with similar taste to you. So I'm going to talk about a couple of booktubers who actually I think mentioned me in their videos. So that is What Victoria Read. Me and her have a lot of similar like books that we like in terms of crime, thriller, mystery, as well as historical fiction. So a lot of the time when she recommends something, I know that I'll probably enjoy it as well. And then another person is Lauren from Lauren in the Books. Again, a lot of the kind of the feminist or female-led like voices books that Lauren reads I will probably enjoy as well, and I love giving Lauren recommendations as well, because I know there's certain books that if I know that if I like them that she'll probably like them too. Now, in terms of kind of feminist fiction and non-fiction, Leanne Rose, who is my co-host for the Irish Readathon, she always has so many recommendations when it comes to feminist fiction, and I always love seeing what type of non-fiction she's reading, and I'm always getting recommendations from her wrap-ups and her TBR or her recommendation videos. So yeah, and then also the person who created this tag, which is Harriet from Harriet Rosie, she also always reads like books that always sound really, really interesting to me as well, and I always really enjoy watching her videos and having Goodreads up so I can mark loads of books to be read, which is kind of like the story of my life. Number 8 is, have you always had this reading taste, or has it changed over time? And for me, I feel like most of it, I've always had it. I've always enjoyed books. I think like I grew up reading books in terms of like, you know, the Magic Faraway Tree and Harry Potter, and books that kind of centered on fantasy and magic. So I kind of grew up loving magic in different ways, so that obviously like went into loving fantasy books and kind of looking at fantasy books in the library. And then as I've gotten older, I feel like I've had a greater appreciation for non-fiction, and then also for literary fiction and female-led fiction and books and stuff like that. I definitely appreciate them more and love them more now than I probably did when I was younger. And the same goes for However, at the moment, I definitely feel like I'm in kind of like a crime mystery era. I really love having a few like crime series on the go that I can just read consistently over the year, and particularly on like my library, whether it's audiobook or something, I've really enjoyed doing that. So that one is definitely something a few years ago I probably wouldn't have done as much, where now I really enjoy a good kind of a crime book, especially if it has a female detective. I really love that. And then question number 9 is just to tag some people. I just tag anyone who is watching this video who hasn't done it, who thinks it could be a good video to do. And I recommend people do this tag. It's a really fun chatty tag to do, and I love a good chatty tag. Please let me know if you guys have read any of the books, what your reading taste is. If there's any books that maybe I've talked about that you've read that you've also loved, I would really love to know. And thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys again next time. Bye.